All right. I am sitting in my underwear and I've just prepared my coffee. I had a late night last night. Um, and the first thing I saw when I looked at my phone were obviously some messages I had received from some people, but then also some memes about the whole CrowdStrike thing and also arguments going back and forth about all of this. And this is in IT humor groups, okay? And it's showing that people have absolutely no concept, even the people that work in the field, of how operating systems work, and they're all generally very similar these days. Okay, so as a Unix guy, when I see people saying this wouldn't happen with Linux, I'm like, of course it could happen with Linux. Why couldn't it happen with Linux? Now, it may be that they're using something similar to CrowdStrike that will prevent it, and we'll get to that. How do you prevent this, right? But the other thing is, who do you blame, right? So I feel stupid having to do this video because this stuff seems so basic. But you know what? I've worked with operating systems for 30 years, okay? So let me break it down for people that don't understand what happened. When you have an operating system running on a computer, even if it's running in a virtual machine on that computer, even if it's running in AWS or whatever, um, the way the operating system works is that you have the kernel of the operating system, and that part of the operating system is able to, for example, control the hardware that's attached and stuff like that. And so uh, some things are happening in kernel space, and those things usually have to happen in kernel space, okay? And the way we protect the kernel space is everything that runs outside of kernel space but needs to get data through the kernel space, we have what we call system calls that are very well tested, that a user level program will call in and say, please write some data to the disk, something like that. But that goes through these tried and true system calls. Okay, so what CrowdStrike apparently, now I don't use Windows, so and I don't know everything about but their software, but essentially they must have something that was running in the kernel space. Now, the thing about kernel space versus user space, let's say there's a problem in user space and you have a divide by zero error, or you have a segmentation fault, or you have a null pointer exception, stuff like that. That program just exits. And it sucks, and you could lose data if you had stuff in memory that it hadn't written out, and it's awful. This used to happen all the time when everything was written in C++ because there just were not enough good C++ programmers. But in the kernel space, when something goes wrong, there's a very good chance what you're going to have in the Unix world is called a kernel panic. And in the Windows world, it's called blue screen of death because it actually throws something up when it panics, right? And these are very, very bad things, right? So what happened with CrowdStrike was that they pushed out an update that went to all these hosts and caused a blue screen of death. And you cannot recover from it because every time the operating system starts up, I'm assuming CrowdStrike is going to start up, it's going to read everything the same way again, and it's going to cause another blue screen of death. And so the way to fix it is to get into what they call safe mode for Windows. In Unix, it would be single user mode. But even that, there could be some problems. I don't know enough these days about how modules are loaded into Linux at boot time and stuff like that. But essentially, you need to get to a point where that thing is not being loaded, right? So you can go in and fix the problem. So essentially, the fix would be very similar between the two. Now, there's this whole BitLocker thing that I'm not going to get into because it complicates things. But that's essentially what happened was that automatically, you if you run Windows, you see this. Hey, we're going to update. It's updating tonight. Trust us. We've tested it. And sometimes something goes wrong, right? Well, anyway, everyone that was running CrowdStrike, it went wrong, and all the machines were blue screening all over the place. Okay. My guess is that most of these are front facing, like you can see at the kiosks at for the airlines, right? Um, I don't know about the back end servers, right? So that explains technically what's happening. It could happen on any operating system, right? But in order for it to happen on an operating system, you have to allow a third party to send updates that work in kernel space without you testing them. That's the real problem here. So is it CrowdStrike's fault? 100% is their fault. But I had a conversation with a manager years ago when these, I'll call them kernel caretakers that update your kernel for you, were coming out. And it's not just for Windows. We've got this for Linux as well. And I didn't get too deep into it, but we were just talking. I was like, oh, what is that? And he's like, oh, it just automatically updates the kernel for security stuff. Now, I didn't dig too far into it, what the policy was with this, but I did say, isn't that a little bit dangerous, right? Of course it's dangerous, and now we've seen what happens. But my kind of assumption was it probably gets pushed into a test environment, and then the go-ahead is given after it's okay there. But in this case, that cannot be the case. And I'm not talking about a CrowdStrike test environment. Maybe even if they had tested it, maybe at some site where someone does something slightly different with their operating system, it could cause a kernel panic there, but not somewhere else. So while they are responsible, 100% responsible for pushing out bad configs, it looks like, or it doesn't look like, well, there's the fact that they have code running in kernel space that could even have a null pointer exception, if that's it, is a problem. So that's another thing. But the real issue comes down to managers making decisions and corporate making decisions instead of engineers making decisions. Why? No engineer in their right mind would have thousands and thousands and thousands of hosts of any operating system automatically updating something in kernel space without it going into a test environment first. There is absolutely no way that any engineer I've ever met would think that's a good idea. Yet here we are today, and one of the biggest, probably the biggest outage in history, that people are still working and working. The engineers are working and working and working to fix these things. These are the people that wouldn't have probably done this, right? Now, maybe I'm wrong. But what I've been seeing a lot lately is that decisions on technical matters are coming from managers. They're coming from people who, let's put it this way, maybe they don't understand the technology. That's one thing. But maybe they also don't want to be responsible, right? They're like, we don't want to be responsible for this. Get CrowdStrike to do it. If anything screws up, it's their fault, right? I've never seen anything like this. It's a huge outage, but it's an outage that is based on sheep. People being sheep and following trends. It's the same thing about just throwing everything into the cloud without giving the ample time to say, how do we do it? How can we be profitable like Netflix in the cloud? Right? How did they do it? And not in the sense of stealing their technology, but saying, what did they have to think about in order to make sure they're profitable while things are running in the cloud? People aren't thinking about these things. They are freaking out, Everything has to get into the cloud. Let's do it. How do we do it? Not how do we make it profitable, right? Just start lay everyone off, because it's all going into the cloud, so then it's all going to even itself out. Even that isn't going to even itself out, right? So this is it really reminds me of the days of the dot-com bust. And I've said this before, but decisions were being made by corporate. The technology they're going to use. I worked at one place where all we had to do was get rid of Cisco in one little spot. But management would not. So they lost customers for a year because they made the decision. that no engineer would ever make. And I won't get into the details of it because I don't want to get sued by Cisco. The company doesn't exist anymore. But that my point is, this is very, very costly stuff that managers are making themselves responsible for, and everyone else is going to get the blame for it. And everyone thinks they're safe as long as they follow the trends. You're not safe. You're still responsible. You made a decision that brought down thousands and thousands of hosts and lost your company a ton of money. It was not a wise decision. As soon as someone told me there was a possibility even of automatic updates, the first thing that went on in my mind is, how do we get that into a test environment and how long do we soak it? You didn't think about these things. That's on you. I don't care what you read from CrowdStrike. You know, IBM has tried to sell me crap lots of times. Just because they say it doesn't mean it's going to work. You have to take the same attitude. It's disgusting. So I think everyone has gotten, everyone's pretty smug these days. I remember I was saying, you know, a syntax error can bring down a whole company. And everyone's like, that couldn't happen to us. You know, we've got our pipelines and all this other stuff. Yeah, I'm sure you do. But then, you know, maybe Elon Musk comes in and starts running your company and brings down the entire network, right? Because he wants something done. It doesn't take much. And everyone's really smug right now, and everyone thinks that everything's running really well. We're putting so many eggs in one basket these days. The thing is, it'll run well until it doesn't. And then you are still responsible at your company, even though you said, let Amazon handle it, I don't want to think about it. You're still responsible if they screw it up. So that's my little talk today. And I'm talking like this because for decades, I couldn't really talk, right? Because who wants to get fired, right, for spouting off? So I'm getting it all out now, and I'll probably never work again as a result. But so be it. You know, if this is the environment that we have to work in now, who wants to work in this environment? I started working in Unix because people appreciated me. And they appreciated my insight, even though I was a junior and I wasn't even very good yet, but I had some common sense. It's all gone. I don't see this anywhere anymore. It's all, what can you do for me? You know? And I don't know when or if we're ever going to get out of this. And maybe there will be no failures from now on. Find it doubtful. Maybe we're just done, right? But I just don't see it. And I don't know how things are going to change. But I do know that these people that have been working, probably on their third day now of working, it's causing a lot of stress to them. It's causing damage to their bodies, okay? And someone is responsible for this. And those people need to be taken care of, okay? That's the end story. So, yeah, it can happen on any operating system you want. It is bad managerial decisions that led to this. Kernels have always been kernels, and they're always dangerous to screw around with. Thank you, and have a good day.